we need to get really concerned when we get a winter storm warning because this means there's an imminent severe condition in place, such as greater than 4 inches of snowfall in 12 hours or less, and or 6 inches of snowfall in a 24-hour period. Hi, I'm Greg Davenport, and welcome back to the JGD Prepared Service Blog, where we discuss disaster mitigation, preparedness, and response. But before we start, please take a minute to like, share, and follow us. It really helps. Winter is here, and for some of us, that means a good time. There's snow on the ground, we get to go sledding, skiing, we get to make snowmen, and we do a lot more. It can really be a great time of year, but it can also present a lot of risk, especially when there is heavy snowfall with significant drops in temperature. Given this risk, I think it's time we talk about what you can do to better prepare yourself, your family, and your community. So we're specifically talking about winter storms now, and in general, the National Weather Service issues several types of alerts well in advance of any winter storm. They just don't happen like that, so we should have some type of warning. These include a winter storm advisory, and these come out when we're expecting some bad weather, but it's really less than hazardous wintry conditions. When we have to get a little bit more concerned is when we get the winter storm watch, and this is telling us there's a potential for a significant hazard winter weather storm within 48 hours. This is when we need to start getting ready. And we need to get really concerned when we get a winter storm warning because this means there's an imminent severe condition in place, such as greater than 4 inches of snowfall in 12 hours or less, and or 6 inches of snowfall in a 24-hour period. So this can mean different things in different areas. So in the southern and mid latitudes, events will often bring 4 to 10 inches of snow to an area that rarely sees accumulating snow. And that can actually paralyze transportation and utility systems. Unlike the Northeast and Rockies, where they have repeatedly seen 1 to 2 feet of snow with occasional snowfall that exceeds 40 inches, they may be able to handle this a little bit better because they have an infrastructure in place that's used to dealing with that heavy snowfall. So how does this really translate to the amount of damage that might occur on the buildings and businesses and people in that area? If we look at the last 10 years, major winter storms have caused billions of dollars of damage through combined impact on power grids, water systems, transportation, and commercial activity. When there is prolonged sub-freezing temperatures and wind chill, buildings are compromised, sprinklers freeze, water lines break, and HVAC equipment is damaged. This can really compromise people's ability to keep their body temperature at the right level, stay hydrated, and keep protected from these outside elements. When there's heavy snow and ice accumulation, you have to realize that roofs can collapse, trees can topple, and power lines supplying neighborhoods and industrial facilities can break. Business interruptions often stem from these power outages, these impassable roads, and workforce displacement. In many cities, damage assessments after a recent storm show a recurring pattern. And this is unfortunate because you would hope that we would learn from past experience. But this past pattern, or recurring pattern, is especially seen in subsidized housing and older buildings where pipes burst, mold grows, and prolonged uninhabitable conditions occur. In addition to businesses and structural damage, these storms can also cause a significant mortality and morbidity issue on those impacted. These winter storms cause both direct and indirect mortality issues or death, with overall storm season fatalities in some years reaching several hundred across the United States. Analysis of these recent events identify exposure to extreme cold as the leading cause of death, followed by motor vehicle crashes and carbon monoxide poisoning from unsafe indoor use of combustible devices. As far as morbidity issues or injuries and illness, we see a lot of cold-related illness from these snowstorms, such as hypothermia, frostbite, immersion foot, and so on, especially among people in unheated homes, those experiencing homelessness, and outdoor workers. We can also see traumatic injuries from falls on the ice and road collisions on snowy or icy surfaces. It's not uncommon to see hip fractures or Colles or forearm fractures during these events. Worsening of chronic conditions such as cardiovascular issues, respiratory issues, renal disease, and so on are often due to missed medications, disrupted dialysis, delayed emergency or primary care when clinics and transportation are unavailable. In most instances, pre-hospital care in these major winter storms seeks to rapidly identify and treat cold-related issues. It seeks to treat traumatic issues and to deal with potential CO2 exposure and provide safe transport despite hazardous conditions. It's got to be safe transport. So let's briefly discuss a few pre-hospital treatments you might use. For example, with hypothermia and frostbite. If you're out in the field, the best you can do is get them out of wet clothing, get dry clothing on, clothing that helps insulate them and protect them from outside wind and moisture. And if they are conscious, give them some warm liquids to drink. And if you have a heat source, by all means, use that. So basically, you're trying to rewarm them and get them out of that hypothermic and frostbite state. Realize that if anything goes beyond that, you really need to get them to the nearest medical facility for treatment. As far as carbon monoxide poisoning goes, you need to get them out of that risk area as soon as possible. And if you have oxygen, high flow oxygen would be a really good thing to do. These people, you need to get them to a medical facility as soon as possible. If there's a hyperbaric chamber or ability there, that may be something that you would utilize in their treatment. The best you can do in the field is get them out of that exposure and get them transported as soon as possible. As far as trauma treatment goes, standard ABC, hemorrhage control, immobilization if needed, and continuous efforts to prevent further heat loss during the extraction or transport process. So what have we really learned over the last decade or so? We've learned a lot of lessons, and it probably all boils down to that hazard mitigation assessment plan and how well we understand this disaster, how well we understand what we need to do to help mitigate and prepare for it, and then how well we're able to put that in place. Let's end this discussion with a call to action. So given these patterns, individuals and families can adapt a practical preparedness plan that complements local in-place concepts. So what can you do? Well, first, you need to build a winter hazard kit with at least several days of water, shelf-stable food, necessary medications, flashlight, batteries, blankets, and a battery-powered or hand-cranked radio. Hey, that's a bare minimum. When I pack my winter hazard kit, I make sure it covers the 5 survival essentials: personal protection, clothing, shelter, fire, sustenance, water, and food. Health, I make sure that I'm able to deal with any environmental type injury and traumatic type injury that might occur. I make sure I have good signaling devices in there, in addition to making sure that I have a charged power device that I can plug into my phone so that if it dies, I'm able to recharge it because the electricity might go out. I also want to make sure that I have a good atlas, street atlas, and something that tells me about the terrain, a map of the area that I'm in, should I have to travel. In most cases, I'm not going to be traveling, but you never know, and that street atlas could prove very important in getting out of an area should you need to travel out to effect your rescue that way. This is all the basic things I'm going to have in my winter hazard kit, along with a few other items like a paracord, a knife, and so on. So make sure you have a good kit available to you. You need to prepare the home by weather sealing the doors and windows, insulating pipes. Hey, if that pipe breaks, you got a problem. So you need to make sure they're insulated. Knowing how to shut off the water. You don't want that house to flood when that pipe breaks. You want to be able to shut that water off, but try to make sure the pipe don't break. And make sure you have a fire extinguisher and smoke and carbon monoxide detectors that are functional, making sure you change those batteries every year. Plan for a power loss. Identify safe ways to stay warm without grid electricity. Remember, that clothing, hey, it's the best thing. Put on layers of clothing, grab blankets, wrap yourself up, trap that dead air. Trap the dead air, protect yourself from outside wind and moisture. You usually do pretty good. Never use generators, grills, or vehicles in an enclosed space to keep yourself warm because you're going to set yourself up for carbon monoxide poisoning, and that's not good. So remember, if you have generators, keep them outside of the house. You run a cord into the house to power anything you're trying to do. In addition to the things we've already discussed, you need to make sure that you're protecting your health. So keep an updated list of medications and medical needs. You need to make sure that you've coordinated things with your healthcare providers on emergency refills and know where local warming centers and emergency shelters are likely to be. This is important just in case you're away from your house should this type of event take place. You need to strengthen social ties. I think this is really important. I can't emphasize it enough. I would establish a phone or messaging tree with your neighbors, family, and colleagues, especially so that you can check in on the older adults, people with disabilities, and those living alone before, during, and after the storm. By adopting these steps into a written family or household winter plan and revisiting it each season as forecast and guidance evolves, it'll help turn lessons from the past decade of major winter storms into concrete, life-preserving actions now.